You're listening to Edge of Faith, a multimedia magazine where we discuss art and culture through a Christian lens. So today we're talking to Lee Benson, accomplished artist and chair of the art department at Union University. Lee, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in East Tennessee. It's good to talk with you.
Yeah. So, I guess the obvious first question for you is, how does it feel to be the number one rated visual art program in the country? And then how did you get there?
Well, it's a great honor. It was something that we didn't expect, but once it came our way, we were very pleased. We worked very, very hard to have a really good program. I've been at Union for 21 years, and we've grown a lot and done a lot, so it's a great honor. I guess the way you get anywhere is just through hard work, and we focus a lot on skill in the first 2 years that you're in our program. So we do a ton of skill-based teaching, and we focused a lot on moving a lot of equipment into the program, from plasma cutters to widescreen Macs, and so we do that. But also, one of our main focuses is trying to ensure that the student understands that there's a big difference between making art and being an artist, and those two things require a lot of hard work, but also a different set of skills. And so the last 2 years that you're at Union, we focus a lot on what it means on a day-to-day basis to be an artist. Even though they continue to practice their studio work, they also, like I just had a group of, I think 4 students came back from Middle Tennessee, where they had applied for and got into a crafts fair in the ceramics program, and so they took their wares over and set up their tent and did a crafts fair over the weekend, which during the crafts fair it rained for one of the days, and which is, as we all know, that's just part of life. Then next week I'm taking a group of my sculpture students to Arkansas. My family runs a sculpture business, and we're building a large piece over in Pettit Jean State Park next week, and I'm taking some of my sculpture students over to do that. And our graphics program works hand in hand with the UN, the United Nations. They've done a book series for children that are in dire straits in other countries, and they also have worked with the refugee crisis that's going on worldwide to sort of be a graphic face of how we might voice a support for the refugee crisis. So I think both of those, a huge concentration on skills and then a huge concentration on what it means to be an artist on a day-to-day basis, helped us get there.
Yeah, well, you can never go wrong with hard work. So maybe the next question I have for you is, what gives you more joy, teaching art or making art?
Well, when I first read that question, I thought that's a no-brainer, making art, obviously. After thinking about it a little bit, I do receive a lot of satisfaction in actually taking a young student who doesn't exactly know what it means to be an artist, doesn't exactly know what it means to create three-dimensional art in contemporary culture, what art actually means today, and how we got to where we are today. And then seeing them become, when you get an 18-year-old student, a lot of times they think rendering. If they can render well, then they're an artist. And obviously, that's just certainly not the truth today. It's a very complex world and requires a complex artistic response. And so I get a lot of satisfaction from that, seeing an 18-year-old really grow and think seriously about themselves as an artist and think about art seriously. But then there's also the studio practice that I think we all get into teaching because we are practicing artists. And I think those times, when the breeze is good and the studio doors are open and you're really working confidently on a new concept and your skills are really, really playing toward that achievement in a good way. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say, but I would, if I was forced to say, I would say making art. So there you go. But it is certainly rewarding, both of them.
Right. Since you're talking about a three-dimensional art, I've exhibited your reinterpretation of the full armor of God at my gallery, and I'll have to tell you that. But some people love it, some people, not as much, but it definitely draws everyone's attention. What was it that inspired you on that piece?
A pastor and his wife, my mom and dad. My dad was not at the day he would always. He'd wear a nice shirt, and I'd say, "Oh, that's a nice shirt, Dad." He'd go, "You want it?" And he always had that sort of attitude of not holding anything tightly on this earth. And I remember the day he died. I don't know why I did it, but I went in his closet to count his shirts, and he had 12 shirts in his closet. And I thought, wow, a lifetime on planet Earth, and your material possessions equals 12 shirts, as far as shirts go. And so when I went home the next day to get some clothes for myself, I went into my closet and I counted my shirts, and I had 62. and that sort of was an impetus to what it is that the contemporary Christian church might want to think about in that resource allocation, how we use the riches that every American, generally speaking, in the contemporary church possesses. I mean, in reality, we're actually drowning in our wealth. We have so much. And I can remember one time hearing Tony Campolo say that the greatest threat to the American church is consumerism. And all of that, and along with the church I now attend or have been attending for the last 22 years, ever since we moved to Jackson, it's a very, very large church. It was, when we joined, it had about 400 members. Now it has several thousand members. So all of that, coming from a family that was fairly poor. I mean, we were a poor family when I was young, but then even when my dad was older and he was able to afford a lot, he never bought a lot. And I guess that's how that piece came to be. Just, it's hard to sit in our churches today. And I tell my students often that, only in America do our churches require you to wear a coat on Sunday because it's so cold. Right. We turn our air conditioners way up. So anyway, it's really it was really speaking to me as much as anyone else.
It was a really interesting piece. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about you and some of your art influences.
Yeah, I think basically I know two things. I know God and I know mountains. When I was 5 years old, my dad preached in fact, I just drove by this church. In fact, we actually stopped in just a little small community, doesn't have a store, doesn't have a red light. It's called Crab Orchard, Tennessee. But my earliest memories of the church was my dad would preach on Sunday morning, and then in the afternoon we'd climb Big Rock Mountain, which was right behind the church. So that's a huge influence. At the top of the Big Rock Mountain are these boulders, that are big, they're just massive boulders, about as big as a 3 or 4 bedroom house, just massive boulders. And my dad would walk us through these boulders. And so that had a great influence on me. I'm very influenced by contemporary sculpture, especially Wolfgang Leib and Andy Goldsworthy, all those, those common names, Anish Kapoor, those people. That materiality means a great deal to me, that what material is able to carry the burden of the idea I'm talking about. And so materiality really means a lot to me. I made a piece. I was struggling with the Lord's Supper and the way our church observed the Lord's Supper, and I felt like we were rushing through it, and I was standing there holding the tray of wine, or grape juice one morning, serving the Lord's Supper, and I realized that I was in no way remembering what took place, and so I as a real devotee toward materiality, I felt like I needed to experience the Lord's Supper in a way in which I could actually sort of feel the Lord's Supper, know that I had participated in it, and I actually purchased a lamb. It was a lamb is a full-grown sheep. You don't think of a lamb as they wouldn't slaughter a small sheep, but I did purchase a lamb from a farmer who mainly sold to the Jewish community for observance. And I actually went to a slaughterhouse and slaughtered the lamb and collected its blood and harvested the lamb and gave the lamb to my family, and we all partook of the lamb. But it all had to do with materiality, to know. It was a very difficult thing to do. And then I used that blood to make a piece called Extreme Unction, which I don't know if you know what Extreme Unction is, but it's it's what the Catholic Church does at the moment when you die. They offer you what they would term extreme unction, and it is that blessing or that anointing of your body at the moment of death when we pass from life on earth to life in eternity with Christ. And I made that piece, and actually that's what made me move through the whole process of this Lord's Supper idea, was that I just felt like I feel like materiality is probably the preeminent thing in which I deal with. What material can carry the burden of the idea that I'm trying to, or that I'm wrestling with or trying to move forward. And so, whether it's lamb's blood or, dollar bills or lapis lazuli, I'm a very, very devoted to material and making sure that the material I use is able to carry the idea that I'm trying to work with. And so those are sort of my influences, but it would all go back to, to God and mountains. Those are the two things those are my earliest resources that sort of made me who I am today. And, I still try to, I'm working on a big sculpture right now that actually is a big hill that I'm making and going to have 7 stones on the top of it. So there you go. So, you don't get past 5 years of age, I guess, when you're an artist.
Yeah, right. The next question I was going to ask you is, what you want your art to convey to viewers. But between your thoughtfulness in everything you make and your faith, I think it all speaks for itself. It's actually quite beautiful. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience or to upcoming artists?
I think I would, I would encourage artists of faith to really celebrate a life of gratefulness, that we are able to participate in, the grandness of creativity. I teach an introduction class to 3 dimensions, and I start that class with form, and the reason I do is to say, we all have form problems. That's the basis of all sculpture is form. What form can carry the idea that you're trying to put forth? But we have, we're in fine company because, God was confronted with the same issue, at the very beginning. He tells us, he looked out upon this void and he said, it was formless. And which basically means it was without form. There was no form in which he could draw from. And because of his utter kindness, all forms followed from that lack of any form. And that's an unbelievably kind act, If you think about a sphere, which he repeatedly used over and over and over again, I would love to have that on my resume. The sphere, I did that. I thought that up.
Yeah.
And so I tell my students all the time, we're so bored with God, we just want to miss hell, really. That's, I think, sort of the preeminent force today. It's like, well, let's miss hell, whatever the cost. But as far as celebrating God and his sort of genuine kindness and living in a state of gratitude, it's like line, that's another one of the elements that I teach. I'm like, I would love to have that on my resume. Yeah, line, I had that concept first. I was, there was no line, but I thought it up. And then, he even gets kinder than that. He goes, okay, I have this thing called line. I have this idea. Well, now here it is in front. Okay, yeah, there it is. And now you know what I'm going to do with it? I'm going to give it away. I'm just going to let anybody wants to use it can use it, which I wouldn't have done that. I'd be like, I would have charged modestly, but I would have charged. So every time someone wrote a letter, they would have to, PayPal me. So I think that's what the last thing I would say is that we have artists of faith have ample reason to live in a state of gratitude, and that's what I would encourage us all to do, to live in, to live with grateful hearts that we get to play in this realm. So there you go.
Well, amen to that. That's wonderful. That's a great final thought. All right, sir. Well, thank you again for taking the time to talk with us and share some of your heart.
You're welcome. I was glad to be with you and glad to be able to share with you.